this video, I have compiled my top 24 Dollar Tree Christmas DIYs of the 2024 season, and we're going to be counting them down to the #1 viewer favorite, starting with number 24. Painting trees on this channel is a staple around the season, so when I seen this piece on Kirkland's, I knew I had to hit up Dollar Tree and grab me a hurricane vase. Even though the glass on the Kirkland's inspiration was crackled, I was sure we could recreate this enough using the Dollar Tree piece, starting with the base. To do that, I thought it was going to be best if we took some multi-surface in the white and some Mod Podge and mixed them together, but I couldn't get started because I was so grossed out. So gross. Ew. Ew. I watched that slimy booger slide right out that Mod Podge. Anyhow, we're going to also take some silver glitter and mix in our mixture here because, you know, our Kirkland's inspiration, it had glittery bits, at least as far as I could see, in our snow. So I thought the Mod Podge would help keep all of that tied together. Just cut off the end of a sponge and just tappity tap tap tapped a nice little line around the bottom. If you want to use some painter's tape to get yours extra sharp, you go right ahead. I was fine doing mine just like this. I let this dry overnight because I knew I was going to be holding this in different positions and wanted to make sure I was not messing up that base we created at the bottom. Then started off by just making the trunk of the tree, and I just mixed like some gold and some brown. You can create this however you would like. Just make sure your paint works well on glass. For the gold color, I'm using this gold metallic paint by Folk Art. Now, it doesn't say on the label that it works well with glass, but I knew I was mixing it with Mod Podge, so I wasn't too worried about that. What I was worried about was how I was going to get those gray and white hues in the background of the tree. So I took some black and white multi-surface and mixed them together and just started creating the bottom of the tree, pulling it from the bottom and then up. And you'll notice as I'm painting, I'm using my heat gun because doing a piece like this, you got to make sure the bottom layer is dry before you go on to the next one. But as I was going, people, I really started not liking this. On a complete side note, people, I hate this. I hate it. I hate the color. I hate how I like the little tree part. Absolutely hate this. So in the event you make a mistake or you hate it as much as I do, you can easily scrape paint off of glass. Just grab a little plastic card or a little piece of plastic or whatever. This is just a little piece of plastic that comes in my dry rub-on transfers. And you can see here, I'm just gingerly scraping it off. And then we're going to just start over. I've been painting glass long enough to know that if you don't allow your paint to cure, you can scrape it back off. You can even create details in your paint. Just be mindful. As I was going along with this, I'm like, you know what? Something's missing. Glitter. I mixed this glitter with the gold paint and some Mod Podge. Okay, that was what the combination ended up turning into. And then started from the bottom and then pulled upward, making the tree smaller as we went to the tippy top of our piece. I took a little bit of white paint on the edge of a paintbrush and just tappity tap tap tapped all around where it looked like our piece was turning more clear as that Mod Podge dried, you know what I mean? And then just created highlights in the tree on each one of the little sections. It's how I decided to go about adding those white highlights that were on our original inspiration piece. And while I feel like I love the Kirkland's inspiration more at that hefty $29.99 price tag, mine for $1.25 isn't so bad either. I was in Dollar Tree's ornament section to find some bells to recreate this Kirkland's dupe. And while they have some bells and larger ones, I didn't really see a way I could recreate those with these. But then a quick shift of the head down and I found these little gems and I thought to myself, these just might work. And lucky for me, Dollar Tree also has these small candles because I don't think the tall ones would work for our small bells for this. With our crafty items in hand, now it's time to figure out how I'm going to make this work. Despite what some of you may think at home, us DIYers don't always know exactly what we're doing. Well, at least me anyway. I can't really speak for anything else. I mean, there are certain things like I absolutely know, and then there's some things, especially when I'm duping stuff, that I'm not really sure what angle I'm taking to be able to help you recreate it at home. But for this, I really wanted it to be sturdy. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to just make something and be like, oh, this is cute. Go ahead and DIY it. Waste your money on, you know, a candle and some bells. No, I wanted you to actually be able to put it out and use it. And I figured out that we can shove these little baby candles in the part that we can push in where the snowflake is on here. So to do that, we're going to need to bring on in the hammer, first of all, because we're going to have to flatten this sucker out. You feel what I'm saying? We got to flatten it to make sure it's going to stay still. So on the back side where you put the little hanger in, I hammered that down to flatten it out because that's the side we're going to keep on the ground. And then on the opposite side, I kept pushing in the candle where the snowflake was. So this way it caught. But I quickly realized that I might hurt myself using my fingers pressing it in because it is metal, and grabbed a little tool and just pressed it in gingerly. And you want to be mindful with this because if you press it too far, you will not have your candle fit in there to just wiggle around. So, you know, check the candle. Look, I'm so happy I was clapping when it worked. And if you construct it right, it's going to stand up perfectly, be pretty stable, and your candle will fit in there snugly and not move around. So I did this to several more bells, carefully, mind you. And then I even decided to stack some on top of each other. This way you could see what it looked like if you wanted to stack 2 on top of each other or 3 on top of each other. And I used some hot glue and some of my Titebond Quick and Thick to make that happen. I did allow these to dry before I went shoving more candles in here. So this way it was all nice and stable. I thought these turned out super cute. Then it was time to bring on in our napkin. We're gonna decoupage these on here, not just by any way. We're gonna be using our heat gun to melt the napkin in here. Now this is something, if you come to this channel, your girl knows a little bit about decoupage. From small crafts to large furniture pieces, you name it, I have probably decoupaged it. Instead of doing this to the entire candle because it can be a pain, I decided to just take a little bit of water onto a paintbrush and trim out pieces of this napkin. I really like the small bits. And I also felt like it was pretty similar to the way that the candles were in our inspired piece that Kirkland had. This can be a little painstaking when you're trying to make sure that you trim something out, but having water on a paintbrush makes your life a lot easier to get really specific when you're trimming down a napkin or tissue paper or some rice paper even. I did the same thing for 4 different designs. Obviously, do this with whatever works best for you, whatever napkin you would like. And then I placed it on our candle exactly where we wanted it. I gingerly wrapped it around. You're going to want to use a piece of parchment paper for this, not wax paper, okay? Parchment is for heat. And wrap it around your candle. I like to use the rub and roll method with this, but the candles were so tiny, I wasn't able to do that as well as I usually do. And while you're heating up your candle, and yes, you can use an iron if you want. It is not my preferred method. I've shared that before. I like to use the heat gun. I allow this to get hot. Keep in mind, it's hot. Like I said a couple times, it's hot. So watch your fingers, okay? But what you're going to want to experience while you're doing this is the napkin is going to turn translucent because that wax is sopping up right through those pores. And when you have that, you have a really good connection. all the spots that are still white instead of translucent, you need to just heat up more and put the parchment paper to smooth it out. It helps reduce wrinkles. I also realized that if you heat up the bottom, if your candle was a little wiggly, and stick it down in there, it's another way for you to have really great stability with these adorable pieces. If I'm being honest, I don't feel like $12.99 is a bad price for these. Not at all. However, I do feel like the $2.50 plus tax I spent on my pieces, they're pretty great too. Did you know that Dollar Tree's pumpkins make perfect backgrounds for palette decor? Especially if you want to decoupage something. We're going to use some TDS Decoupage tissue paper with little snowman design, but first we're going to need to disassemble this pumpkin. And the best part about disassembling these pumpkins is it's super easy to do. Everything just kind of comes right on off. For our base coat, I'm going to just use some Waverly Snow White chalk paint and put a nice layer over top of this pumpkin, covering up that orange and the letters. For our medium, I'm just using some Mod Podge and putting a nice coat all over the entire piece. I'm using my mister here just to spritz a little spritzy spritz of water right over top of the decoupage tissue paper. You do not have to do this. You can absolutely just apply the paper without any spraying. But I find that sometimes when there's little grooves on stuff, it just helps me be able to manipulate it and get a really nice bond. Once the piece was dry, I wanted to make it a little rustic. So I grabbed my finger sander and just sanded down where the palette grooves were and all around the edges. To add a little something something around the edge, I grabbed my Dollar Tree metal lace and I just pulled enough out to wrap around our tabletop decor here. I'm going to bring on in the stapler so we can use this to attach onto the palette. I have definitely glued this stuff, but I find that if I'm going to use it to attach it, especially to wood, that stapler works the best. I wanted to make sure that decoupage paper melted in with the background, so I grabbed some more of that Waverly white paint and dry brushed around all the edges and where I sanded everything down. Once that was completely dry, I then grabbed my Mod Podge and put a very nice thin layer of sealer on it. On a recent trip to Dollar Tree, I seen these letter ornaments with the Santa hat, and I had a really awesome idea to use them not just as ornaments, but as decor. To do that, we're going to decoupage this piece. We're going to need to create a base, and you can use a chalk paint or a multi-surface. Really is up to you, but I highly recommend using one of these two on a surface like this. Giving it a nice white background is just going to allow whatever you're decoupaging onto the piece for the design to pop. I decided to go ahead and use the Waverly Snow White chalk paint. I want to use the iron-on method on this piece, so I'm going to put a nice healthy layer of Mod Podge right on the top and then let that dry naturally for about 3 to 4 hours. I know, people, I hate waiting too, okay? But it's been my experience that it just ends up best if we let it dry naturally. Make sure that your piece looks nice, thick, and juicy like this with Mod Podge everywhere, and then set it to the side. When it's dry, pick you out a napkin and then get rid of all the sneaky layers. We're just going to use that top decorative layer and we're going to cut that piece down to fit right over top of our letter. Now it's time to bring on in our iron. This is the iron that I like to use. I usually just keep this little joint right next to my craft station, turn it all the way up, let it heat up, And then I will grab some parchment paper. You want to use parchment paper, not wax paper. Parchment paper is for heat. Make sure everything's in place. Pick a side and iron from one side to the next. When you're sure that you've attached everything, take a second and just look over the piece. Make sure everything is connected all around the edges. Now it's time to get rid of all the excess, and usually I sand that off. But for entertainment value today, mine and the light were in the garage, but I know I got some little pyros in here, and y'all love to see me do randomness with my crafting, so here we go. Fire, fire. Ooh, ooh. You can absolutely sand this off, but I decoupage so much and I rarely ever do this because I scare myself. But it does work. The M is for Mama, which is the nickname that I call my mom. She told me I could decorate her house for Christmas as long as it had blue in it. So when I seen this ornament, I thought this would be absolutely a perfect little way to add a little something into one of her kitchen shelves. A great way to use the colored candles at Dollar Tree is to paint designs onto the front of them. One of my favorite paints to use for this I pick up at Walmart. It's by Folk Art. It is a multi-surface paint and it is really inexpensive. I've also used chalk paint before. I find that they work pretty well, but I have noticed that anytime I try to do this with just regular acrylic paints, I'm putting on some coats and it can be a little tedious when you're painting on wax. So save yourself the trouble, people, and learn from my struggle and just go ahead and use chalk paint or a multi-surface. I'm keeping this DIY super simple and just painting a nice snowy ground and some trees. If you want to seal over your piece, you go right ahead. And if you want to burn a candle that you paint, I would recommend not putting too much paint on around the top, kind of putting your decoration down at the bottom and just burn it till you get to that point. Or not burn it at all. It's so pretty. And if you struggle with hand painting, just grab a stencil, people. Wrap that sucker right on around the candle. Grab you a pouncer. Make sure it is pounced pretty dry. Now, one section I did do a little bit heavier because if you make a mistake in your pouncer or whatever you're using to apply your paint onto the candle through the stencil is a little extra. I want to show you how to fix that mistake, okay? When you're happy with your application, just remove the stencil. And if you happen to see where any bleed through came about, just grab a paintbrush, a thin one, of course, a thin one. And then you can easily, because it's still wet, and the wax material, you know, it's waxy, you will be able to just kind of follow along with the lines, trace kind of where it was, wipe that excess paint right off, and it really it's hard to tell where you had any bleed through with your stencil. While I was watching this video on Pinterest, I seen these little frames in the background. I'm like, that looks really familiar. I think I have some of those. And I do. I had these Dollar Tree frames. They're like chalkboard pieces. Had a couple of them, so I figured I would take some white paint and recreate those little frames, but put my own designs right on the inside. These can be a pain to paint to begin with, so I like to start with a sponging and then I'll go over them with the paintbrush and a fan brush and a detail brush. Allow them to dry. Usually it takes about 3 coats, but when you want to get in all those tiny details with a different color, and here I'm going to be using Antique Waverly Wax, take a tiny detail brush and go in all those little sections. Once it dries, no matter what color you're doing this with, I've done this with a couple different colors, it looks a little weird, but I promise you take some of the paint that you had as your main base and you dry brush right over it, and it just blends out all those beautiful details. Off camera, I gave the backside of those chalkboard pieces a nice coat of white paint. This will serve as a nice background for our TDS Rice Paper designs. These are A4 in size, and I'm just gonna take them and place over top of our little cardboard pieces, and then just press around where I need to cut and trim for the design that I want to be on the inside of the frame. You can attach your rice paper however you would like. I'm going to use some good old Mod Podge and put a nice little coat on these pieces and then apply our gorgeous rice paper right to them. I wanted to share how this idea is awesome, whether you're using it for one beautiful single piece that you want to kind of make the center of attention, or if you are wanting to highlight the background of something. These frames and this idea is absolutely perfect to just add some unique decor into your home this holiday season. Dollar Tree's frame section is a perfect way to dupe some high-end Kirkland's decor, and they have various sizes to choose from. For this dupe, I'm going to go with this large piece right here. If you want to paint your piece, go right ahead. I actually like the frame, and I think it's going to work perfect just the way that it is and the color that it is. So I'm just removing everything, and then I'm flipping the picture over, and we're going to use the white background of it. For this first idea, I'm just going to take a piece of TDS A4 in size rice paper and lay it right over top of that white paper and put our glass down on top of the rice paper. You can cut out a piece of poster board to go on top if you would like, but I felt like this idea was fairly simple, and as you can see here in our Kirkland's inspiration piece, it still gives the same effect. There are so many ways you can take this idea and remix it to fit your decor throughout the year. Dollar Tree has so many different size frames, and painting them to match your home is super simple. Whether your idea is to use a larger piece like this or a smaller piece like this, the idea, in my opinion, is high-end looking either way. For these first two inspirations, I just used TDS creative products, whether I was using tissue paper or I was using rice paper to give you the idea. But you can grab scrap paper from Dollar Tree or little cardstock pieces from wherever, and then just take a dry rub on transfer, and you can get transfers from anywhere. I'm using TDS creative product here. This is a dry rub on transfer, and I'm going to put it over top of a piece of scrap paper that I had in my stash. This is just another idea for you to be able to take this Kirkland's piece and switch it up to make decor that you love that matches your home. Even taking personal photos of family and taking this idea to make decor around the holidays, that would be really cool as well. Whenever you're making candle decor, it's always a good idea to bust out the napkin stash and go through all your little gems and find some perfect pieces. I definitely was feeling just a little bit Christmassy for this project and grabbed one of Dollar Tree's white unscented small pillar candles. I personally feel like these are absolutely perfect if you are new to decoupage and you want to try and decoupage a napkin onto a candle. And if you've never done this before, I'm going to show you one of the easiest ways to try this at home, what I like to call patchwork. This can be tedious if you're doing a large amount of them, but we're just going to do one. We're not trying to rush all in here. We're going to need just the top decorative layer of the napkin. So remove all them sneaky layers and then trim down whatever section you would like from your napkin. I'm just trimming down as close as I can to these little ornaments and just kind of measuring it around our candle to make sure it's going to fit exactly where we want it to fit. Next, grab you a piece of parchment paper. We're going to use this to help attach our napkin. You will need a heat gun as well because we're not going to use a medium. This way, if you want to burn it or if you want to give this as a gift, they can burn it as well. Instead, we're going to put our heat gun on low and we're going to just kind of melt that wax. You'll see how it's turning clear behind our little patched napkin piece we have on here. And you want that whole piece to turn clear. That means that the wax is seeping up through the napkin and it is catching the napkin, attaching it as it dries. I use the parchment paper to just kind of put it in place and it dries within a couple of seconds. You can absolutely do this to your heart's desire, put as many pieces on here as you would like, or do it for a whole entire napkin, which it can be a little tedious. It's always a good idea to leave a little bit of overhang so this way you have room for errors. You can trim them down and then melt around the top so this way everything is attached and it looks really nice. Now this is perfect just the way that it is, but I wanted to add a little something extra, so I grabbed some TDS dry rub on transfers and I just cut out a little Merry Christmas section. Putting transfers onto candles really depends on the quality of the transfer and the size. I don't have the best luck doing this with larger sections of transfers, but for small little pieces like this, it usually applies really well and it adds just a little bit of something on to the candle. Still kind of safe to burn. I've burned these down and the transfer itself will kind of shrivel off. But if you're going to put a medium or anything over it, I wouldn't recommend burning it. The colored candles at Dollar Tree can serve as the perfect background for adding something onto the pieces. And in this case, we're going to be adding on some TDS dry rub on transfers. A question I get asked is, can you put transfers on candles? And my honest response is it depends. Not all transfers are created equal and some are more tacky than others. It's always a good idea to just put a nice base on here, and I like to use Mod Podge to do that. You can let this dry, then it's going to give you a nice tacky surface for whatever transfers you are using to stick to that wax, well, to the Mod Podge. And it's important to keep in mind that transfers are not meant to go on wax. They're meant to go on wood, ceramic, glass, things like that. This is definitely not a typical surface. However, if you got some patience and determination and a little bit of elbow grease, usually I can get small transfers to stick onto the wax without any Mod Podge. But definitely for the larger sections, the Mod Podge helps and it just makes the process that much better. Do not let the editing fool you, people. You know I don't like to pull the wool over your eyes. Definitely it's going to take a good 3 to 5 minutes of rubbing these transfers on here. It is patience, but absolutely worth it for decorative purposes. These are perfect to just plop around in different sections, whether it's for seasonal decor or everyday use. And you can accent these on up with twine and whatever else you would like to fit your decor. They would even make great little gift ideas. A little Christmas palette decor from Pinterest? I don't mind if I do, especially a little wood basket. So I grabbed some of Dollar Tree's wood palettes, 3 of them to be exact, in this style and 2 in this style. And I grabbed some paint sticks, which I get from Home Depot, in case anyone's wondering. I'm gonna use some antique Waverly wax for our color, and I'm gonna add a little bit of water. This just helps move the antique Waverly wax around. I also do this with paint. I've painted hundreds of palettes at this point on this channel. I've shared many different techniques to be able to do this. If you can't spray paint them, adding water to paint or antique Waverly wax, it helps. But people, I still hate it. Definitely not one of my favorite things to paint or stain. I took a minute and pieced everything together with these palettes once they were dry, and then just added a little bit of hot glue to start. I find when I'm not sure the exact placement of something, that's always a good idea to start with, and then I'll come back in with some Type-On wood glue or some tacky glue, or here I'm using the Quick and Thick on a paintbrush and just going over everything, all the seams, to ensure that we get that nice long hold. I found a little snowflake stencil floating around in my stash, so I grabbed some white paint and a little paintbrush and just went in very gingerly on our piece, coloring it in. I then grabbed our paint sticks, and people, this is completely up to you. Measure them how high you would like, and then trim them down to whatever size you would like, and then just attach them. I used some more of my Type-On Quick and Thick and put everything all together, added in some greenery, and I love how rustic this little piece is. I absolutely thought this framed paper dot Christmas tree was beautiful, and I got the idea to create something similar with some napkins. So I grabbed a Dollar Tree frame and I painted it up white with my Waverly Snow White chalk paint, allowed this to dry, and then I went and grabbed some cardboard to trim it down to size for our backing. I decided to go with cardboard. If you wanted to use real wood, you absolutely could, but I knew Dollar Tree had these amazing wallpaper pieces, and it was just a matter of picking which one was going to be perfect for the background on our piece. So I grabbed a couple and then made a couple comparisons with the frame and with the napkins until I decided which wallpaper I thought would match the best. Then I trimmed the wallpaper down to size, attached it to the cardboard, and put it inside our frame. For the tree trunk part, I just grabbed some dowels and I cut them down to size. The size really is relative according to what you think is long enough. I didn't measure mine, I just eyeballed them and went with it. Two of these pieces are napkins, and then one is a piece of burlap. I couldn't really find a blank napkin that I felt made sense with these two pieces, so you'll notice here that I'm using double-sided tape to attach the napkin. I want it to have some freedom that if I mess this up, I could pull it back off. So I started out with the double-sided tape. I put like 2 or 3 strips down, and then gave it a little bit of a wavy appearance. You could do this as much or as little as you would like. I just went with a minimal amount just to give a little something something. You could absolutely leave it flat, completely up against the board. You could grab some scissors, give it that scalloped look, but I decided just to do that mostly with the napkin pieces. I used hot glue for the burlap because I knew that the glue wasn't, or the tape wasn't really going to hold that into place, and then just alternated with the layers and trimmed the tree up as I attached everything into place. At the top of my tree, I decided to add a little bit of greenery and a star. Absolutely finish off your piece however you would like. I love how shabby chic this piece turned out. Even if your seasonal decor section might be lacking at Dollar Tree, there are always some little gems to find in their wood blank section. I picked up 2 of these little wood boxes with the llamas, mostly because the other designs like this rainbow one, they have large gaps, and the llama, it didn't. The gaps were minimal, and I knew we'd be able to cover them up easily to create these covered candy dishes. There are a couple different ways you can fill in these holes, but first I want to start off by grabbing some painter's tape and just putting it on the back here. This is going to stop whatever we're putting in them holes from seeping through. You can use some spackling if you want, joint compound, caulking will work as well, but I like to use my little texture paste mixture here, just kind of smush right over. This stuff sands down really well, and that way I can have a nice non-chemically product on my piece. While that's drying, I grabbed some of my TDS Decoupage tissue paper and cut down a couple different designs. You can use napkins, you can use regular paper, whatever you would like for this. Decorate your box however you would like. I'm gonna be using some good old Mod Podge for my medium to decoupage little pieces I just cut out and put together all around our boxes. It took a couple hours for the top to completely dry, and then I just grabbed my finger sander and off camera over the trash can, I gave it a nice sand. Removed the painter's tape off the back and then did apply a layer of white paint over top just to seal in any of that mix and give us a nice clean base for our decoupage. After your pieces are dry, grab a little piece of sandpaper and go around the edges and get all the excess paper off your piece. I took some black paint and went around the edges and grabbed some little wood knobs I had in my stash to put right on the top and painted them black as well. Make sure you take a second, iron up the center of your box before you press it down. You don't want to accidentally put it in the wrong spot, try to pull it up. You will probably mess up your paper. There are always a ton of goodie options at Dollar Tree, so pick whatever you would like, pop it on in your little boxes, and put them around your house. to show you how you can take little wine cork bottle lights and shove in the top of these so you can make your decoupage ornament glow. This is just one of the Dollar Tree ornaments that we're going to be using for this project. You'll notice if you take the cork light and you place it in here that it doesn't necessarily fit. It's a little bit wonky and it's not going to be stable at all. So we want this to set in the top here just perfectly, and we're going to use some twine to do that. For anyone interested in purchasing these, I do have a link down in my Amazon store in the description box. And yes, there is a battery pack on here, so they can be replaced. Once we glue the twine and all that stuff on here, you'll notice we're not going to be able to get the battery out and replace anything. So keep that in mind while you're making these. If you want to be able to replace the batteries, then obviously glue these together differently than I'm about to show you. We need that twine to create that cork stopper effect. And to do that, I'm just going to take some and wrap it around right underneath the button, because we also need access to that button. Once I'm happy with it and I put it back into the ornament and I notice it stops, I'm just gluing everything down. I unraveled the lights and then started pushing them down inside of the ornament using a couple different little things. I didn't want all the lights just sitting in one corner in the bottom of the ornament. I wanted them to be spread out so everything had an even glow. In order to be able to hang our ornament, we're going to need to create that hanger effect. So I cut a couple inches of twine and then glued it down to each side, making sure it was able to fit in top of our ornament. If you put it together right, it should look like this. And we want to make sure that you don't wake up on Christmas morning with a bunch of decoupage ornaments on the floor. So we're going to grab some tacky glue, rub some around the top of that ornament, around the twine, around the hanger. Make sure we shove that sucker down in there real tight and put it off to the side to dry. Then it's time to pick you a napkin. I'm going to be using this beauty that was sent to me from a subscriber that I had sitting off to the side. I was waiting for such an occasion. I'm going to remove those sneaky layers on the back. Now, my preferred method, there are several ways to do this, is just to tear a corner, it reveals the sneaky layers, and I just pull them apart. We're only going to be using the top layer for this. Then I took a minute to cut down the napkin. If you've never decoupaged anything that is round, it can be a pain for someone like me that's been doing this for years, let alone a beginner. So having too much excess to deal with to try and not get attached can be a pain. To attach the napkins, I'm just going to be using a fan brush and some good old Mod Podge. But first I decided to take some of my Waverly Snow White chalk paint and apply a layer onto the back of the ornament. I'm not going to put it on the front because then we won't be able to really see the glow from the fairy lights we put inside. And people, if you want to decoupage the whole ornament, you go right ahead. Truth be told, I was being lazy and I was like, nope, we're not doing both sides. It's been my experience that when we're blending a piece, sharp edges don't really give that effect. So I'm going to take a little bit of water and just spray around the edge of the napkin. Don't oversaturate it because you will destroy it. And then just break, creating a little bit of a tear. This is going to allow our napkin to just blend into the color that we painted around the edges. Keep in mind, you might have to tear more of the napkin once you get this applied on here. Just having it torn already in certain sections just helps give you a head start in the event that some pieces line up perfectly. Whenever I'm doing ornaments like this, I find it best if I just pick the center of the area and then put a decent amount of Mod Podge around where I want the piece to go. I never really go all the way to the edges. This way it allows me the ability to come and fix it as we're blending it to the side to help reduce any excess wrinkles. You'll see here I'm using a little bit of water to remove the excess paper and taking the cling wrap to help smooth it around as I'm applying more Mod Podge and just attaching everything. I allowed that to dry and then came on in with the white paint and tappity tap tap tapped all around the seams where the napkin met the back, just blending everything in. Use whatever sealer you would like for your piece. I just took some Mod Podge and went over the whole ornament. I grabbed my Dixie Belle silver gilding wax and went ham on that little cork piece. Really did not like the color of it. It felt like it stuck out like a sore thumb with our beautiful ornaments and felt like that silver really helped bring this piece together. Over in Dollar Tree's non-seasonal section, there's always some goodies to pick up to kind of get you in the mood to create seasonal decor, especially these new ceramic pieces. I absolutely love these things. And yarn, well, they got tons of colors, so I'm just gonna grab a green one. We're gonna take all these pieces and create a tabletop decor set, starting off by taking this yarn and wrapping it around just the top of the stars. You can cover your stars completely if you would like to. I decided to wrap mine and leave just a little bit of that wood hanging off right of the tips. Whenever I'm attaching fabric of any kind to wood, I really like to use tacky glue. And in this case, as always do, I just grabbed it and started squeezing. However, to my surprise, I didn't attach the lid the last time I used it. Oh, I think I ruined it. I think I saved it. I think I saved it. I think I saved it. Let it dry. Now you can paint these ceramic beauties on up if you would like to, but I wanted to go with a little modern feel, kept them just as they were, and grabbed some black ribbon and just attached them right to the center. You can absolutely leave these blank if you would like, but I had these little ornaments that I collect throughout the season, and I thought they would look just perfect right in the center. Next, I grabbed some floral foam and just shoved it right down into those ceramic pieces. And just like I hoped, that tacky glue dried clear and you could not tell that I dropped it all over this thing. So I just shoved it right on down into our little ceramic piece. I grabbed a napkin, used that instead of messy moss, and then added some greenery. I'm not sure if you see the little wood 3D craft kits that they have at Dollar Tree, but I always thought it would be a really cute idea to use them in floral foam and add them into your arrangements. So I just put a couple pieces in here for a little something something, and I absolutely adore how these turned out. For this Kirkland's dupe, I was searching Dollar Tree's ornaments section to see if I could find something that would work. And lucky for me, I did. They had the bells in silver and gold, however, they were glittery. I know, but we're gonna make this work, okay? First off, we're gonna have to get rid of these little hangers. And honestly, it was really easy. They're these little twisty ties. You just, untwist them and they pop right on off. However, I was already starting to get stressed out because it was getting messy. We are going to put a stop to that by applying 2 layers of Mod Podge on each one of these and allowing them to dry in between. This is going to seal in all them glittery bits and stop them from shedding everywhere, so we can put a layer of chalk paint over top of these pieces. Now I checked them just by rolling them around in my hands to make sure there wasn't a ton of glitter coming off. Now keep in mind, if you want to spray these with some Rust-Oleum clear spray paint, that would work really well also, because there were still glittery pieces coming out of inside of our little bells, but I was fine with it for this. And then I took a sponge and tappity tap tap tapped that chalk paint all over each one of our bells. It ended up taking 2 coats for decent coverage, and once they were dry, it was time to bring on in the hammer. I'm gonna make it make sense. Hold on a second. For the ends, we're gonna be using these little pieces of scrap wood I painted the same color white, okay? As you see me putting these on top here, it's not sturdy, okay? These bells ain't sitting on top of each other without some finagling, and that's what the hammer is doing. It's creating a divot and making the ends flat. So when we put them on top of each other, see how it perfectly just falls in the little divot we've created? That's because the bell stays curved, you know what I'm saying? And you only had to do this to the one side and the piece that was on the top and the bottom, if that makes sense. Hopefully you're rolling on with me. I used some tight Bond Quick and Thick and some hot glue right next to each other to attach everything. This turned out super sturdy, and it surely would not have without me hammering the pieces flat and making those divots, so this way each piece set into each other. I was trying to just pile them suckers right on top of each other. I'm like, I can't figure out how these are just going to stay and be sturdy to hold anything on top of them, and the hammer, it was a problem solver. Now let's take a look at our Kirkland's inspiration for $59.99 and how my dupes turned out up against those beauties for $6.25 because I had the scrap wood in my stash. You could create the ends so many different ways. Even use some little terracotta saucer pieces. That would look really cool as well. But I was trying to recreate these as cheap as possible and using pieces in my stash. This is one of the large colored ornaments from Dollar Tree. We're just going to remove this piece off the top. Oops. And then we're going to bust out the clay molds. Really not sure what molds I want to use, so I just grabbed a couple of them. Use whatever type of clay you would like. I'm using paper clay. That's one of my favorite clays, and I'm just pressing it down into these border molds. I get most of my molds off of Amazon for anyone that is interested, and I used our tight Bond Quick and Thick here to attach the clay pieces. This can be really tedious if you have the smaller ornaments and you're trying to do that on those. I have done that before with those, and I figured let's get us a big ornament because we're going to get artsy fartsy with this decoupage piece, and I really wanted to have some room to play with on this ornament. I used 2 different molds to create 2 different borders, so we had 4 total, and I just trimmed the clay down to size, and then I added some leaves around the top. I recommend letting this dry overnight before you start to paint your piece. You could paint it beforehand. You could go about this several different ways. This is just how I decided to tackle this. There really isn't no right or wrong way. It just depends on the way that you want your art done. I'm using 2 different color greens. When I'm doing a piece like this, I like to have a variation of different colors. I feel like it just kind of brings it to life, along with allowing different sections to pop. I use those green colors to color in the leaves along with the border pieces that we attached. I don't want to decoupage right onto this silky plastic, so I'm using a creamy chalk paint to paint right here in the center. Normally I'd use a pouncer for something like this, but because it's such a small area, I just use a detail brush to make sure I didn't go too much over the green sections that I had painted. Once your piece is completely dry, then it's time to decoupage. I cut out 4 different sections from my TDS Decoupage tissue paper. I'm going to use just a little bit of Mod Podge and spray a little bit of water onto the back of these little sections and gingerly apply. I'm not going for perfect here. If I was, I'd cut little slits in the side to make sure they evenly molded around our ornaments. Instead, I'm going for that vintage look. You remember back in the day, well, it depends on your age, you could go over to your grandparents and they had these big old Christmas bulbs around their tree, and they were so vintage and so pretty. And my grandmother always had tinsel on her tree, and that's really what inspired this whole ornament, is just that vintage vibe. I don't always get the opportunity to get extremely artsy with my decoupage, but it's truly my happy place. When I'm sitting and decoupaging something, everything else just fades away and my heart just fills with joy. I hope you all truly enjoy this piece. Once I had everything put on this ornament, I took that green and smooshed around the edges, blending it together, and then added a little bit of gilding wax to the edges to make everything just pop and look cohesive. Now for you LED candle lovers like me, we're going to grab some more TDS Decoupage tissue paper and pop a little decorative design right on the front of this Dollar Tree LED candle. Napkins to me are a perfect decoupage piece if you want to be able to burn your candle. But if you're anything like me and you want to get creative and pop glue or glitter or whatever, LED candles are amazing for that, especially if you want to use decoupage tissue paper, because most of the time you're using Mod Podge. But one thing I hate doing, and I always seek help, is whenever I gotta cut down a piece. Hey Ma, how much do you love me? I don't. You don't. Would you mind cutting this down for me? Absolutely disrespectful, right? She cut it down anyway. She did a good job. We're gonna use some Mod Podge to attach this right onto our LED candle. You never need a whole lot to be able to get a good attachment, and I always love how the LED candles look once they're lit up and all decorated. For this quick and easy wall decor piece, I grabbed one of Dollar Tree's large DIY star signs. In one of these little nesting boxes, I'm going to just take some black paint and give both of them a nice coat. You can absolutely use whatever color you would like for yours. Once they were both completely dry, I grabbed a large stencil and placed it right over top of the whole star. You can use paint if you would like, but I'm going to take some of my handmade texture paste and give this a nice coat. You can also mix in acrylic paint whenever you're doing texture, give it a nice color. I happen to like it just the way that it is for this project. When you're all done with that, peel it right on off and then allow this to dry for a few hours. I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick to put a nice little layer on the back of our box that we're attaching to the star, and then it was time to bring on in the stapler. I attached the box and this flipped it upside down and, was mindful making sure that I was putting the staples in the right spot. For the shelf portion, I wanted to just use one of Dollar Tree's LED candles. Lately, I have been in love with adding TDS Dry Rub On transfers onto candles. Been adding them onto the LED ones, adding them onto the regular ones. I've just been really loving popping different things onto candles. Now, keep in mind, transfers are not meant to go on wax, so it does take a little bit of elbow grease, but with some patience, usually the LED candles I find are the easiest to plop them onto, and I love how they just add a little something extra into your decor. Absolutely love how this whole piece turned out. Dollar Tree has a large selection of candles, which are great for decoupage decor. These are amazing to add napkins onto and still be able to burn them, or grab these LED joints for that ambiance feel and decorative touch without burning. And people, I love to give you options, so we're going to do just that using this TDS Decoupage tissue paper for our first one. I'm going to cut out these little pieces right here and create a set. These are also kind of the perfect size to make ornaments with as well. Anyhow, we're going to use some Mod Podge as our medium to attach the decoupage tissue paper. I know, Brandy, can you burn them if you add Mod Podge? I would not recommend that. I get that question pretty often. These are strictly going to be for decorative purposes. However, just hold on a second. I am going to give you some more options and some techniques for doing that. Once they dried, I did add a little layer of Mod Podge over top of our pieces, and I love how this little decorative candle set turned out. The large wood blanks at Dollar Tree aren't just good for single piece decor. I'm going to grab 4 of these snowflake pieces and we're going to stack them on top of each other to create a snowflake riser. To attach all of them, I'm just going to use my quick and thick tight bond and some clamps. And then I noticed that my tight bond was kind of clogged up. So I got my little Cricut tool here and grabbed my needle nose pliers and just unclogged it. For those of you who love oddly satisfying things like me, you're welcome. And for anybody else that was disturbed, my bad, my bad. Listen, we do weird stuff around here. Welcome. There are several different ways you can create risers or get that thicker effect. I decided to just cut out using all the beads and the tumbling blocks and popsicle sticks and whatever else I've used in the past, and just pile these suckers right on top of each other. I've also noticed that when I'm doing stuff like this, if I use hot glue, even though it's helping to attach things quicker, it will leave gaps. So I just went ahead and used the Titebond Quick and Thick and the clamps, and I really love how close the adhesion was on these pieces, along with the thickness of the overall riser itself. I grabbed some of my spackling and shoved a little bit in that hole we had here, so this way it didn't look like a bunch of ornaments. Use whatever legs you would like for your riser. For this one, especially since it's the holiday season, we're just going to use the little snowman pieces from Dollar Tree. I usually always have these in my stash and pop right on the bottom. For our main color, I'm just going to use some white paint and I'm going to use a little bit of black paint to give some accents, mostly just around the edges and for the stencil we're going to put on the top. Yes, my stencil was not rinsed off. okay? I can't even remember the last time I used this stencil, but it was in my stash and I was like, it'd be good for putting more black paint right on top of it. And it was just fine. What a great way to use those large Dollar Tree wood blanks. We are going to grab some Dollar Tree's hanging snowflakes and a wood plank to create our own unique wall decor. Take this idea and remix it using whatever colors work best for your home and your decor. I'm going to just take some black and paint a nice coat all over just the plank section and allow that to dry. While it's drying, I'm going to take the snowflakes and cut them all off the twine and then grab some white paint and paint them all white. When they were done drying, I grabbed some more twine and then cut little pieces to attach to the top of each one of the little snowflakes. Did not reattach the snowflakes themselves. I put them to the side and then went and grabbed one of my stencils that were in my stash. I did order this off Amazon for anybody that was wondering, and I put it in the spot just to kind of measure where that was going to end up. Then I grabbed some metal lace. You could use ribbon for this if you would like, and I cut a couple sections and applied it right to the end and made sure to also cover over those holes that we don't want anybody to see. I cut up some greenery and stuck them into the metal lace. You can absolutely glue them down, but I knew I was going to be putting berries over top of them and I waited to add the glue. I then flipped it over and added the snowflakes onto the back with a little bit of hot glue and a little piece of cardboard. Then when that dried, I flipped it back over and added on those berries. If you want to use paint, you go right ahead. I'm just taking a little bit of my homemade texture paste and going to smear it right on the Believe section of the stencil. I cut the little Santa sleigh section out and put it right on the top and then added more of that texture paste. Believe it or not, this only took a couple minutes to make and it absolutely looks like something you would purchase in a store. Next time you're in Dollar Tree, head on over to their wreath section. I found this frosted berry pinecone beaded wood wreath at Kirkland's for $49.99, and I knew we could dupe it using one of these and some floral foam for that pinecone berry bundle on the top. Our Kirkland's piece had white beads, so I decided to paint mine white too. I'm just using some white chalk paint. If you want to spray paint yours or paint your beads however you want, you go right ahead. This is just how I did it. I'm just going to use one of the little squares in that floral foam pack, and I'm cutting out a small section that is going to snugly fit our beads right on in there. I'm going to use some Titebond Quick and Thick to make sure everything sticks together. However, I had a little clog in there again, and I knew my little oddly satisfying lovers out there enjoy watching this stuff. So here you go. Once I had that tube cleared out, I poured a healthy amount into that little space that I cut out in our floral foam and placed the wreath form in there. Then I just went through my floral stash and grabbed things that I had on hand. Obviously, if you need pieces to create your floral part, you go ahead and pick them up. Dollar Tree has pine cones there, they have the greenery there. I just wanted to try and save as much as I could recreating this Kirkland stoop. It took me a minute to get everything in place and also added some floral moss over top of the foam in spots that were showing. I thought it needed a little something something, so I grabbed my white chalk paint here and a sponge and just tappity tap tap tapped some flocking all over this floral part of our wreath. Here is our inspiration and here is my dupe that I only spent $2.50 on since I had a large portion of the greenery and the pine cones in my stash. Next time you're in Dollar Tree around the holiday season, head on over and grab some of these large wood ornament blanks. We're going to use these to create some amazing wall decor accents, and I'm going to be using not one, not two, but 3 of these for that. I'm picking Admiral Blue for my color scheme for these beautiful ornaments. By all means, use whatever color best fits your decor style this season. I only put 1 coat on these and then I allow them to completely dry. If you want to do more than 1 coat, by all means, you can right ahead. I was happy with these just as they were. Next, I'm grabbing some large stencils I had in my stash that I picked up from Amazon quite some time ago. I love damask and ornate things, and I felt like these would be perfect right on the front of these. You can paint your stencil in if you want. I'm just going to take some of my homemade texture paste. This is just a mixture of calcium carbonate, baking soda, and glue. Usually I'm able to mix up a batch and it stays for about 3 to 5 days. And people don't even try to ask me about the ratios, okay? Because I mix with love. Listen, just mix some stuff in a bowl and, cross your fingers and start spreading it on your ornament. Look how pretty. I used 1 stencil design on 1 of the ornaments and then the same on 2. And I made sure, obviously that they matched. You could color your texture paste if you want, or if you're painting, you can use obviously whatever color paint you would like for this. Whenever I'm doing this, I like to let this sit several hours, at least 3 to 4. And a good way that I can tell if it's done is I will take my fingernail and I will scratch over the surface. If there's no nail indents, then it's done. And you can either leave it as it is or put whatever kind of sealer you would like over it. You can leave your ornaments as is, but we're going to jazz ours up just a smidge and add some of this floral metal ribbon that you can pick up from Dollar Tree. If you don't see this at Dollar Tree and you have a Hobby Lobby local to you, they also sell metal lace or metal ribbon. You can pick it up from there as well. I used this to put around where our hangers kind of go because I'm not adding a hanger on the top of it. This is just going to be our added accent on here. And I just pushed them around and squeezed them tight around the back, and then it was time to bring on in the stapler. I'm gonna take this and just pop a staple in to each side just to ensure that this doesn't come off. I personally want these to be kind of flat up against the wall, so I'm just using a little bit of glue, a little piece of cardboard with twine for the hanger on the back. If you wanted to use the holes that were in the top, you go right ahead and do that. I love the way they look just like this. I love some unique bucket decor, so when I seen these pieces on Pinterest, I just knew I had to remake them. And to do that, I headed on over to Dollar Tree, right on into their garden section, where I knew they were gonna have at least something similar if they didn't have their original flower and garden pieces. So we're gonna leave my piece just as it is, and we're gonna need to create that base, and we're gonna use some cardboard for that. I know, just hold on a minute and roll on with me. It'll make sense in just a minute. We are going to need a brace for all the things we're going to put on the top of the bucket. You could absolutely use floral foam and cut that down to size, but I chose to use some cardboard, and I'm trimming the top out larger so it just sits right on the top and we can glue that down. Then I'm also trimming down a couple sections that will fit right to the top of the bucket so I can glue them on top of the top. And again, use floral foam if you like. This is just how I chose to go about creating this project. Since my piece of cardboard is going over the top of the whole bucket and I'm gluing that down, I just wanted one piece to kind of stabilize the center of everything. You can use as much as you would like in the center to make sure you have some really good stability. For some of the florals, I headed over to the at-home store. If you guys have one of these local to you, I'd love to share this place. They do have some expensive pieces, but you can also find some really budget-friendly pieces like this one for $4.99 and all of these beautiful stems for $1.49, $1.99, $2.99. And then, of course, I headed on a good old Dollar Tree to grab some little extra bits for our bucket. And some moss. I grabbed some moss. I know, sometimes moss is just essential to your craft stash even though you hate it. We're going to use Type Bond Quick and Thick to put a couple stripes on top of our cardboard and just kind of smush that around. Then I'm going to add some hot glue. It's been my experience working with moss, and this stuff, ooh, this had a smell. Why do you stink? Like, ew. What is, yeah. Air you out a minute. Anyhow, as I was saying, it's been my experience that if I just use hot glue to attach moss, depending on what I'm attaching it to, it will start to come back up. So I'll use like tacky glue. This Quick and Thick works really good. I've even used wood glue along with the hot glue to get it down and just have everything kind of stay in place. Then I grabbed some floral foam. I know our Pinterest piece kind of had like that tree effect, and then one had some houses, another one had a little bird. And since I was using owl as my main piece, I wanted to incorporate the same type of tree effect and then just piece it together from there. So I placed the pieces down in what made sense to me, and while it only takes a couple seconds here for you to see it, I actually took about an hour or so putting this all together little spot by little spot. And people, I share this often on the channel. I feel like I'm pretty florally challenged. So it's important for me to take my time doing this to make sure it turned out very similar to our Pinterest pieces. And if I'm being honest, it is one of my favorite floral pieces I've ever made. And I actually had a lot of fun making this. As always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this Christmas countdown. If you're looking for more inspiration this season, check out this video right here. And don't forget to stop over at the DIYstruggle.com to check out TDS creative products to add to your craft stash for your next project today. Until next time, bye!